Hello, good morning. This is Rob Curley. I am the editor of the Spokesman-Review, and we are continuing our virtual Northwest Passages community forum series today. This morning, we're going to have a really interesting discussion. We're talking with Pui-Yan Lam, who is a professor of sociology at Eastern Washington. She also serves as the director of faculty commons there. She actively engages in racial justice work in Spokane and throughout Eastern Washington with her participation in the Asian Pacific Islander Coalition here in Spokane and the Spokane Coalition of Color, as well as other local groups. So Pui-Yan, thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I feel like there's so much that we can talk about. We've had such great discussions with people over the last week, and I feel like you can help us understand parts that we don't really talk about as much. So with COVID-19 affecting everyone, I'm curious about its effects on Asian Americans. Like, is there a rising anti-Asian discrimination happening right now because of the pandemic? And are there recent hate incidents and reports and stories that we should talk about? I feel like the experience that Asian Americans are having right now is different than other Americans.
Yes, so of course, in Asian American communities, we have to deal with things that everybody is dealing with. We're concerned about our health, our family's health. We are concerned about the economic impact. We are wondering what will happen to our jobs, what will happen to our business, what our kids are learning and not learning, when they're at home. But in addition to that, Asian Americans communities also have to worry about the rise of hate crimes against Asian Americans specifically. And this is something that affects the United States, but unfortunately, like the COVID-19 pandemic, it is also affecting people of Asian descent all across the world. We're also hearing cases in Australia, in Canada. In the United States, there have been like kind of quick efforts to capture, to get a sense of how this is affecting Asian American communities in the United States. For example, there is a project called Stop API Hate. And so it's a collaboration between two Asian American organizations and also San Francisco State University. They quickly put out an online form in English and a few other Asian languages for people to report on the experiences that they had. And so within the first 2 weeks that came online, so it was basically the last 2 weeks of March, they had already over 1,100 by incidents recorded. So 1,100 cases within 2 weeks period when not everybody in the Asian American communities got a chance to learn about this project. And so that number is really alarming. And there are also other efforts. For example, there are social media groups, there are Facebook groups that have been created for Asian Americans to share their experiences with discrimination. And so we are talking about kind of range of experiences, from people being shunned, that people basically, kind of very clearly, try to avoid them because they're Asians. There is workplace discrimination. There have been verbal harassments, up to cases of physical assaults. And so there were people who have been punched, people who have been spat at, and racial slurs being yelled at. People have been told to go back to their country. And so it is really alarming, and even children have been targeted. And this is something that is escalating very, very fast in a very concerning rate.
Are we seeing that sort of dramatic impact here in Eastern Washington as well, or how would you typify everything you just explained with where we are right now?
Um, so, well, since I work with the organization APIC Asian Pacific Islander Coalition Spokane chapter, we have been working with Spokane Police Department. From the Spokane Police Department, fortunately there have been no reports of hate crimes yet. So things that rise to the level of hate crimes by a legal definition. So I haven't heard firsthand stories, but I have heard stories about people being discriminated against, feeling that people are treating them differently. But this is not first person, so I don't want to share things that I didn't hear firsthand. But what I have heard firsthand is that because people are paying attention to these stories of what had happened to Asian Americans, so I had friends who are of Asian descent telling me that when they go out, to the grocery store, they are worried. They don't want to go alone. They might be worried if I go out wearing mask, if I'm going to attract negative attention. So definitely the fear is here in the Spokane communities too.
What can a compassionate person in Spokane who wants to combat hate against Asian Americans, what can they do?
Yeah, so for me, I like to be a hopeful person, and I do think that we have compassionate people in Spokane who want to do the right thing and want to be part of the fight against hate. We have our share of experiences with hates in a Spokane community. So I do know people who are active in that fight against the bigger problem of hate in Spokane. And so one of the things that I want people to recognize is the power of language. I think it is easy for well-meaning people because I think we don't want to give that much power to hate. And so it is easy for them to like dismiss, well, these are just words, don't ignore them, don't give them the credit and it will go away. But unfortunately, it is not an effective way to deal with hate and discrimination. Language can be a very powerful weapon to spread hate. But language also can be a powerful instrument of love and compassion. And so instead of dismissing the power of language, we need to use the power of language in the way that we want. And so what I would like people in Spokane to do is not only to denounce hate, but also choose compassion when we speak. So the reason why we need to be extremely cautious about speech that promotes hate, one powerful dynamic is to kind of make a group, single a group to make them kind of the others, make them kind of those people, making them like them. And so this kind of language that creates the us versus them dynamics, it can be a dangerous strategy to lead to the dehumanization of a group. And especially linking a group to a disease is one of the powerful way to dehumanize a group of people. And this is why the World Health Organization years ago already had issued guidance on what not to do when naming a disease. And in the guidance is specifically stated that we should avoid terms that include geographical locations, referring to a culture or a population for that reason, because of that powerful stigma that can attach to a group of people and the consequences of that. And so why this is such a powerful strategy to spread hate, because dehumanization kind of overrides our conscience and enables people to commit extreme acts of cruelty once we don't think of those groups as one of us, as full human beings that gave people kind of the license to commit this act. And we have learned historically when certain groups were dehumanized. We have seen it even in the history of Asian American in this country. When we looked back at the anti-Chinese movement back in the 1800s, look at how they were being talked about, how they were being portrayed, and the dehumanization of the entire Chinese immigrant population, and the anti-Chinese riot, and the anti-Chinese mob violence that took place. We have some really horrific cases, even in the state of Washington. There were anti-Chinese riots in Seattle, in Tacoma, and also we have seen in the history of Japanese American the result of dehumanization through the experience of the mass incarceration of Japanese American. And so this is what we are starting to see with the Asian American populations in the United States. So I talk about the rising number of hate incidents against Asian Americans. For example, in the case happens in Texas, someone physically attacked a person, stabbed a family. He stabbed, I think, the father and two children age of 2 and 6. And so you can see, this is the impact of that when people would choose to attack little children. We can see the power of hate right there. Several cases we are seeing Asian Americans being spat at. And so I think this is clear, that acts, the meanings of that act of spitting at someone is also showing signs of how Asian Americans are being dehumanized when they are being targeted as subjects of hate. And so what I would recommend people compassionate folks in Spokane to do is to actively speak against hate. And also what we need to do is to do the opposite of othering. We need to do the exact opposite of dehumanization. What I mean by that is when we speak about Asian Americans as a group, we need to kind of present them or tell stories to make people recognize the humanity of the groups, that they are multi-dimensional human beings just like us. They are individuals who are all different and unique. They are not just a one-dimensional stereotype. And I think we need to use language that signals that we embrace our Asian American communities as part of Spokane, that we are all Spokaneites. It's when we say we as when Spokane community need to work together and to deal with the problems that we are dealing with our communities. This includes Asian Americans. They are part of our communities who are trying to find ways to help each other. And so we need to send a message that our Asian American communities are us. They are Spokane. And I think the other ways to humanize Asian Americans in our midst is to also tell the history of Asian Americans in Spokane. Some of the Asian American populations here are newcomers, but also we have had people who came generations ago. So in Spokane, we do have a long history for our Asian American communities to be, part of us here. When we look at early, Chinese immigrants coming to Spokane, Japanese American coming to Spokane. We used to have, Chinatown in Spokane. So we are part of the history of this city, of this town, of this community.
So there was a piece of what you just said that really struck a chord with me, and that was the power of language, and language that seems subtle but is oddly very powerful. For 5 years, I lived in Southern California and was the editor of the Orange County Register. And we did a series on the anniversary of the fall of Saigon, because when that happened, the largest population of Vietnamese people in the world outside of Vietnam came to Orange County. And over the course from the 1970s until modern era, there was this moment where a generation had grown up with the Vietnamese in their schools and in their communities, and the Vietnamese were elected officials, where the Vietnamese community in Orange County switched from being them to being us. It was a very defining moment where you know, that community looked at the Vietnamese as us, not them. And I see exactly what you're talking about, where the power of that switching from they to us, them to us, makes a huge difference. And I don't think people get that powerful subtlety. You know, it's not, I wonder how they are doing. It's I wonder how we are doing.
Mm-hmm. And so I think it is really empowering, I think, on one hand, when we recognize what we can do simply by paying attention to how we speak. So I think it is, you know, I think we shouldn't just kind of let people who hate to embrace the power of language. I think we need to have people who are compassionate to embrace the power of our language and to be a little bit more intentional. And I think this can be also a very defining moment for Spokane in terms of how we choose to kind of move forward when we have this common problems to have to tackle. And so this can be a defining moment of unity for Spokane here. So this is, I think, why I remain to be hopeful, even though I am hearing all these stories about anti-Asian discrimination.
So along those lines, the power of language is really it has a power most of us don't understand. But I also think that we're not understanding the power of empathy. Okay, let's talk about the power of empathy in all of this.
Yes, and so I think I teach sociology, and so I think one of the things that I try to convey to my students is when they, you know, gain all this knowledge, I think the way, you know, one of the things about knowledge is also it can be used to build empathy, and it is not just knowledge in the head, but it can become kind of internalized and kind of how we, you know, kind of filter through, you know, what we know in the head through our hearts. And that could be very powerful as well. And so, for example, there are tangible things for people, and very powerful thing for people to deal with their empathy. So, for example, you have a friend, you know, comes to you and confides with you their experiences of discrimination, or, you know, their fear of anti-Asian discrimination. I think it can be our common response because people, I think, you know, with well, you know, with good intention, they want to say, well, don't worry about that. It is just a few bad apples, you know, a few ignorant people who did that, or they try to say, well, maybe this is what, you know, that person tried to say, or not what they meant. Especially in some situation, maybe there's is a little bit more ambiguity. But I think this is not people need right now. I think for people who share experiences with discrimination, or yet when they share the fear of discrimination, I think they want people to listen. I think they want people to understand. And I think they want people to empathize with them. And I think if you can listen and validate their feelings and validate their stories, it can be a very powerful dynamics and it is more reassuring that way instead of dismiss what happened. And I think this is a way to build bridges as well. I think people don't recognize that experiences with discrimination are very traumatic. It's kind of, it is, if you feel a sense of violation, it makes me feel like whoever you are, whatever you do, the contributions, the achievement that you have made, don't matter anymore. The only thing that matter is just your racial identity, how people perceive you because of your racial identity. And so it is, I think it is a big deal when people confine with you what they fear or what they have experienced. And so your validation would be very meaningful to them in that very vulnerable movement. And so I think, sometimes because we're supposed to stay at home. So people might not be able to face to face, if through face to face, manner, to share the stories with you. So you have your friends or people who are Asian Americans, and they're sharing their own stories, or they're sharing other stories with discrimination. I think there are things that you can do to validate their kind of the fear or concerns. You can, simply post message and say, thank you for sharing this story with me. This is important. And then, share with them where you stand, that you don't condone this behavior, and that you will, stand up against hate. And so this is another way, even if we're not seeing each other face to face, there are still powerful and simple ways for you to show your empathy with Asian Americans. So I think, simple, or if you have, sometimes we will share things on the social media, and unfortunately, there are people who are not as understanding. And so you can also, maybe send a private message to them. I saw this conversation, I'm here for you. What would you like me to do to support you when there is, heated arguments? Or inappropriate comment that people share on a friend's Facebook page about anti-Asian discrimination. And I think also, besides, kind of reacting to hate discriminations or people's not so nice response, that I think also people can reach out to Asian Americans that they know, just check in with them, and you don't have to ask about, hey, I heard there are anti-Asian discrimination. You can just check out, like what we would do, checking our own friends, how are you doing with the stay-at-home order, are you holding up all right? I think those simple gestures would mean a whole lot. It's also a way to open up dialogues, to show your empathy. And for me, I know that when I take walks outside in my neighborhood, when people smile at me and wave at me, I think people in Spokane do that. I really appreciate that. But I think at this moment, those simple gestures mean a whole lot more to me when, under, kind of all these atmosphere out there, all these concerns that we have, and just seeing a smiling face, or even just with all the anxiety that we have to face right now, just seeing smiley faces, friendly faces, people waving at me, made me feel like I'm part of the community.
Well, what I like about so much of what you just said is that in a world filled with so many problems, those are solutions. And I want to talk about some other solutions too. What are strategies that we can embrace to combat racism? I mean, so you've just talked a lot about empathy. What are things that are much stronger that we can do as a community to combat racism?
Mm-hmm. And so there are a lot of groups out there unfortunately, because of previous kind of incidents of hate. And so there are a lot of good strategies, curriculum being developed in terms of how we can be an effective bystander, and also to intervene safely. So for example, Teaching Tolerance is a website that has a lot of great resources. They also recently issued an article that specifically addressed coronavirus racism. So they have kind of a simple 4 steps approach to it. So first is to interrupt instead of just kind of let comments slide by. You stop a person. So let's say it's a family conversation. You are having Zoom chat, with families, and someone just make a passing comment, and you can interrupt the person and just say, hey, wait a minute, what did you just say? And then instead of like getting into a heated discussion or being confrontational, you can simply question the person, what do you mean by that? Why did you say that? And I think That is effective because it gets the other person to think about the meaning of they just said. Because when you are confrontational, people start to get defensive, and so they stop listening. So I think questioning, asking questions like, "Why did you find this joke funny? Why did you choose to use this term? Or where did you get that information from?" Is a powerful way for people to reflect, and hopefully they will change as a result of that. Education, so educate yourself about what's going on or the history of anti-Asian um, anti-Asian movement, and so you have the historical context for people to understand why um, these small acts also are important for us to do something about, to interrupt. And also I mentioned the echoing, just for people who are targeted, just to amplify the messages, show that you agree with them, and also sharing their opinions, sharing their thoughts, through your social media, and so, or even thank them for saying what they said. It is a way to a way to also make changes, and don't let kind of the hate to dominate kind of our narratives out there. And so I mentioned that I am a member of the Asian Pacific Islander Coalition Spokane chapter. We are partnering with Peace and Justice Action Leagues of Spokane. We are going to do a virtual online bystander training this coming Tuesday from 4 to 5:30. And so people can sign up. You can go on to PJL's website, pjalls.org, and sign up for the training, so you can be effective and also safe when you try to interrupt hate and be kind of an allies with us. And also there are a lot of efforts organized by other Asian American communities. There are a lot of virtual conversation that have been taking place. I have attended a virtual town hall that was organized quickly, that drew 2,000 people, not just Asian Americans, but other folks who want to be part of the solution. So there are a lot of these opportunities to talk about what strategies we can adopt. There are, for example, efforts to support Chinatowns in different parts of the United States. There is a support Chinatown movement kind of in New York City. There is kind of our Save Our, support our international district movement going on in Seattle. And so it is not just something that was organized by Asian Americans, but basically people of all races, embrace that. And so they're trying to give business to like Asian restaurants in international district or other parts of the Seattle area. There are people who try to support the Hmong flower farmers who sell the flowers in Pike Place Market. So there are a lot of efforts, to show tangible support. I think because a lot of the Asian businesses, not only that they're losing businesses because of the stay-at-home order, but also because of people's prejudice against them. So they were seeing the impact before we are told to stay home. There are also efforts to encourage people to report hate incidents. So not only people who are the targets can report this incident, and so if you have witnessed hate, you can go onto this website to report hate incidents as well. So I mentioned the Stop API Hate webpage that was created in reaction to this recent rise of anti-Asian Americans discrimination. There was already another website that was kind of nationwide, Stand Against Hatred, that was put together by Asian Americans Advancing Justice. They have a form not only in English, but also in Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese for people to report. So you can share information if you hear, that, a friend has been a target of hate. You can also share this information with them. There are ways to report, and we are working on that in Spokane as well. So APEC Spokane has reached out to different entities in Spokane. We have reached out to our city's Human Rights Commission to make sure that people know how to report hate incidents and report incidents of discrimination to them. And we have also reached out to Spokane County Human Rights Task Force. They already have a form on their website, and we are working to see if we could make that form available in Asian languages. And also we have worked with Spokane Police Department. They have given us their recently updated handouts about how to report hate crime. And we are working on having it translated into different API languages. And we appreciate all this collaboration, all these people that we have reached out to. They are very responsive. We had a virtual meeting with Chief Maidal. He takes it very seriously, and they have not only shared the information, but on their Facebook page, they have kind of a brief statement to say that they are going to take hate crime seriously. And so I think we need more people to spread words about these different channels to make sure that people know this is the way, that they can report hate crimes before things happen, so that they have the information on hand. That, for people who don't speak English, if they call 911, they will be connected to an interpreter. And so language barriers should not be a problem to prevent people from reporting hate crimes. We want people to be safe. And so hopefully by spreading all this information, by making it known that Spokane communities would not tolerate hate, that would make people think twice before they commit an act of hate. And this is why spreading the information is important. We hope that people don't need to use this mechanism to report hate. We hope that by making it clear what Spokane stands for and what Spokane won't tolerate, we are going to prevent this horrible incidents from even happening in the first place.
You've just given so many web addresses. I hope that you can share those with me via email when we're done, and then I'll post those on social media. And then we're writing a story for tomorrow's paper, and I'll try to get those web addresses included in that story as well, so that it's easier to find the resources you just mentioned. So we've had a few reader questions, and I'm very interested in your take on both of them, though I know a little of the answer of one of these. One is bigger picture, but looking at Spokane, and this is from Christy, who wanted to know what or who do you think is the most interesting Spokane Asian American story, recent or in the past? Just is there a person or an event that you find interesting in Eastern Washington?
Just in general, kind of stories about Asian Americans?
Yes, an event or a person. Like, what do you think is the most interesting?
So for me, I think Spokane Japanese American history is very interesting, and I think important to know. I think one aspect, I think what makes it also kind of unique and interesting is because Spokane is just right outside of the evacuation zone. And so actually there were Japanese Americans moving to Spokane to escape being mass, escaping internment, escaping mass incarceration. And so we have a very unique Japanese American history that I think I want Spokane to know about. And also, kind of knowing that also we have kind of a, kind of long Chinese American history of kind of how they, came to Spokane, to Eastern Washington early on. And I think I remember I forgot where I find, those old census records. They were like digitized now to see kind of these really, really old census records and seeing the Chinese names on that. So I think that is also interesting too, because I think people have come to think that, well, Spokane has, been a very wide community and not recognize that, well, actually, that, it's not necessarily the case, but unfortunately, sometimes because of hate, that, kind of changed the, kind of the demographics a little bit because of that. And also what I want people to know that is Spokane is becoming more diverse. I'm really looking forward to see our 2020 census data. And we have, a very diverse Asian American population. We have many different groups speaking many different languages. We have people who are recent, like newcomers, and we have people, again, like I said, who have been here for generations. And so to recognize that they're about Spokane, just, I'd like to hear about, kind of, when kind of how people ended up being in Spokane, and the many different stories, kind of how people ended up being in Spokane.
Well, that's the obvious question. And how did you end up in Spokane? You were originally from Hong Kong, is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I came to, well, first I was, my first stop at in Eastern Washington is going to Washington State University to get my graduate degrees. And then, so when I was finishing up getting my, getting my PhD, then I got a job at Eastern Washington University. So it's my job there that brought me to Spokane. But of course, before that, when I was in Pullman, I'll come up to Spokane once in a while. So actually, Eastern Washington is where I spend most of my time in the United States. And so I am Spokaneite. I feel like I have a long history in Spokane already.
Yes. So another reader question. This is from Ellen. I didn't know anything about the Chinatown in Spokane. Where was it? When was it? What was it like? What can you tell us about Spokane's old Chinatown?
Uh, so I encourage you to check out Spokane Historical, a wonderful website. Also, you can you can download the app on your phone. By my colleague, created by my colleagues in history department, my colleague Larry Sibiller and his students. And so actually, there are some pieces from that app that talk about our Chinatown and talk about also our Japanese American communities. But it's basically the downtown area in Spokane where these Chinese, Japanese stores or establishments are.
So that's I'm kind of we've talked about so much and covered so much ground. I before I let you go, uh, is there anything you'd want to add to this? Anything we haven't talked about that we should touch
Um, I think I just want to say that I I so I think it was interesting when I first got to Easton, when I first started, there and moved up to Spokane. One of the things that people would say to me is Spokane never changes. Not in a good way, kind of like we will be the same, we will be, very homogeneous, very white, and this is the way that Spokane is going to be. I think Spokane is changing. I'm sure people are noticing the increased diversity in Spokane. I know that most folks embrace that increased diversity. And so I think we're really in a moment in Spokane history that there are a lot of exciting things that can happen. There are good things that can happen as a result of the increasing diversity of Spokane. And so I think I want people to embrace it. I think I want people to actively and intentionally to not only kind of symbolically embrace diversity, but there are, like I said, there are many things that we can do to use this moment to change Spokane for the better. There are already great things about Spokane, but this is really promising for Spokane Night to embrace.
Well, I can't thank you enough for being a part of this discussion, and I appreciate all of the knowledge you shared with us, and I hope that we can talk again soon.
Yes, definitely. I really enjoy our conversation, and I really appreciate the questions from the audience too. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You have a good day. It's beautiful out there, so you should go experience it. I mean, look at that blue
Okay.
sky right behind you.
Okay. Well, yeah.
All
Now
right.
to the library and grab a book.
Yes. Have a nice day. Thank you so
You
much.
too. Bye.